And we'll start with the negatives because it's always fun to start with the negative stuff, right? People love wildlife. Anybody here like wildlife? Got to be a couple people, right? Okay, good. So anyway, so a lot of people, when they see wildlife, they try to interact with it. One big thing that we run into here in the city of Fresno, we have something like 300 ponding basins in the city. Their main job is to collect storm water, recharge, that whole kind of thing. But each of those little ponding basins has created its own little ecosystem. And in each of those little ecosystems, you have the typical duck and geese that live in those. I'm sure everybody who's lived here in Fresno is driven by a ponding basin full of geese. I'm sure everybody's seen that. So anyway, so one of the issues that we have here is that these little ponding basins can only support so much life. But people feel bad for the geese, especially in the summertime when it's hot and the geese are looking all desperate out there. And they promptly back up the bread truck and feed these guys all year long. So we've come across a situation in the past 5 to 6 years where the numbers of these resident Canada geese have increased to the point to where we're having disease outbreaks and there's herds of geese wandering down the streets of Fresno. I'm sure you guys have seen that. And all of these situations have more or less been caused by people's need to interact or feed these animals. So it's kind of a big issue that we have. And I think as we move into the 21st century or 22nd century or wherever we're going, as people get less and less detached from living with wildlife, the more of these anthropomorphic things start to happen, the more feeding the animals, the more pets that people bring in. Because you see a raccoon on TV and it's cute and fluffy, but in reality it's probably not the best thing to have in your back bedroom. So those are that's kind of on the negative side of what I do or what we do. On the positive side, because there is a positive side to all this animal interaction stuff, people do help a lot of animals. I like to think that I help occasionally. It happens every now and again. We do a lot of scientific research, population dynamics, things like that. We go out and put ear tags and transmitters on animals, try to do research to figure out what they need so we can keep forward in our mission and in the end make healthy and happy populations of animals. So that's kind of what I got. I probably went pretty fast through that.
I'm so short, I'm just going to stay seated because when I stand up, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference anyway. My name is Callie Garner. I'm the director of Fresno Wildlife Rehabilitation Service, and I brought a fresh pair of eyes with me. She's one of our volunteers and has been with us a while, and we're here just basically to, I guess, introduce you. When I got asked to do this, I thought, I don't see the connection between robotics and wildlife, but whatever, we're here and hopefully we can answer questions for you. Our goal, I started the organization 42 years ago, and our goal basically was at that time to take in orphaned and injured native wildlife and return them back to the wild. And it's still our goal, but I think even more importantly now, we focus a lot on education, because we realize we can't make a dent in anybody's mind unless we educate. And getting to the young people before they're already jaded is really a prime concern for us. So we go out, we visit between 15 to 20,000 children and adults every year, and we do it at no cost. So if you invite us to your school, we will come if we can get you into our calendar, and we do not charge. We bring in animals. So today, Taylor and I are feeling kind of out of our element. We usually bring in birds of prey, and we're sitting here going, where's our prop? Where's our prop? But you can find us at the Clovis Antique Fair every year. It's coming up, and we'll be at the end, Clovis on Pulaski, closest to the British Car Club's display. And we come in with almost every bird we have for our education is there. And we deal a lot in raptors. Our specialty happens to be raptors, predatory mammals, and deer. Those are the things we're known for. But we do take pretty much everything. By law, we're allowed to take in all native birds with the exception of the California condor, which thank goodness I don't want one in my home. It's too big. And in terms of mammals, we don't take bears and we don't take mountain lions. Pretty much everything else we can handle. We don't do a lot with reptiles or amphibians, but we do have a volunteer of ours that's really into reptiles, so he's been taking those in as we get those kinds of calls. And we get a lot of nuisance calls. We get a lot of people that have trapped an animal that's been eating their cat food in their backyard, and they're now afraid that it's going to eat their Yorkie. That was the exact call that I got this morning at 7:15. She had trapped it. She's an elderly woman, and she now wants us to come and remove it. So we get those kinds of calls all the time, but our main focus is really education. And if we're talking about some of the negatives, Taylor and I were discussing this earlier, we get calls that are so bizarre that you couldn't even write a script for this. People who have purchased a fox, a baby fox, from the back seat of a car in the old Safeway parking lot. And actually that fox is immortalized on our t-shirt logo. Her name was Fidget, and that name fit her. But after they kept it as a pet and they realized that it was starting to get on their daughter's high chair, and then eating the food off of the tray and taking food out of the baby's hands, they thought, gee, this might be dangerous. Gee, you think? And so then they called us, and because it was so incredibly tame after being raised in the house, there was no way we could possibly release it. We ended up using Fidget for education for the rest of her life. She stayed with us until she died of old age, and she actually was a surrogate mother for raising baby foxes to be wild. So once they come off the bottle, we have a really good surrogate plan where our mammals, our adult education ones, raise the baby so we don't have to have any more hands-on, and then they go back to the wild in a much better condition. So I'm going to let Taylor mention a little bit about the deer issues that we've had.
Hi, so one of the issues that we have with Fresno wildlife during the spring, or we also kind of refer to it as baby season, that's when all of the babies are pretty much on the ground. One of our biggest problems is with deer. So when deer are born, the mother will leave the young deer, usually in a certain spot so she can go and forage for food, and she'll leave the young deer there for a couple hours. Well, what happens is somebody will see this deer and think, well, it's by itself, I don't see the mother, it must be orphaned. So what they'll do is they'll pick it up and they'll bring it in the house. So a couple different situations that happen. Either the person thinks, it's orphaned, the mother's no chance of ever coming back. They think it's adorable, they'll try to keep it as a pet. Now, it's not easily reversed. Once these guys are tame, you can't just throw them back out to the wild, because the thing is they know what people are. So if you put them back out, they're going to keep approaching people, and once they grow up, they are very dangerous animals. They have sharp hooves, they have antlers. They're no longer that cute, cuddly baby. They're an adult that can do some serious harm. The other situation, if we're lucky, the person will call us or they'll get in contact with a rehab, and we can successfully reunite the mother with the baby. But a problem with that too is that when you initially touch the young baby, the babies are born with no scent to them. So when you touch them, there is now a scent, and that is what attracts predators. So that's also another issue. So typically when you see a young deer by itself, you need to assess the situation or call a rehab before you ever touch it. And we get that a lot where people think they're doing good, but in reality, it's not helping the baby and they're typically harming it. So there are very few situations where when you see a deer, you need to actually act. Like situations where they'd be too close to the road or there is actually another animal trying to go after it would be situations where you would call us and we could help walk you through it, but the majority of the time, the baby deer is completely okay and is fine on its own.
Thank you, Taylor.
I don't like the microphone because I don't feel like you can really hear me. There's this echo. All right, so my name is Callie Carbajal. I'm from the SPCA Animal Shelter. I'm sure you guys are aware of us. We actually work with them quite often when we do get wildlife. Because in case you guys didn't know, if you find injured wildlife, not only can you contact Fresno Wildlife, you can also bring them directly to us. We get in contact with them, and then they can go ahead and rehabilitate, treat, or whatever it is that they need to do before they release this animal, if it's available to be released. But basically, I just want to give you guys a little bit of background of what happens at the SPCA. in relation to like that human-animal bond and how that can be broken, unfortunately. So the animals, just for your knowledge, they come in mainly in 3 different ways. They're usually coming in as strays. That means that somebody brought them in because they found them on the street, or the second way is that they turn them in because they no longer can care for them, and then the third way is that they're actually confiscated. So they have to be removed from the home because they're not being taken care of properly. They could be due to abuse, neglect, or something like that. One thing that we noticed that all of these 3 situations have in common is that there was a link between that animal and that person, that human that had them before. Unfortunately, this link is broken. So what I call that link is trust. And when this animal comes into the shelter, there is no longer that trust. And it usually is because the person felt that they trusted their dog enough to think it wasn't going to jump out of the fence or get out, or the dog trusted the human thinking that it would be taken care of forever by this person, and unfortunately that did not happen, so now the animal is out of the shelter. And so when the animals do come into the shelter in any one of these different ways, they are going to follow a different pattern, so their time is going to be different. So for example, if a stray comes in, there is a mandatory hold time. We have to hold on to them for a certain amount of days by law. If the animal doesn't come in with any form of ID, we hold on to them for 5 days. With an ID, it's 10 days, so their time actually doubles. And then at that point, if there's still no owner, nobody coming to reclaim if this is a stray, then we go ahead and assess the animal, want to make sure that it's friendly and that it is not too unhealthy that it can be treated. And if they meet those 2 criteria, then the animal would get transferred over to the adoption center. That's kind of the process, for example, like what would happen to a stray if they come in. Unfortunately, as we know, that's not the case for every animal that comes into the shelter. We do get about 75 animals every single day. If you sit at the front desk and you count in a 24-hour period how many animals we're bringing into the shelter, it's about 75 or more. For example, 4th of July, New Year's, because of the fireworks, we see higher intake. Unfortunately, this week we also had to go on a very difficult case. You guys have probably kept up on the news of animals that were confiscated from a place that claimed to be a rescue, but unfortunately we're neglecting their animals so severely that we have to go in and confiscate almost 150 animals. So we were already overwhelmed as it is by the 600 animals that we care for on a regular basis, and then we just brought in one day 150 more to add to that. So it's been very significant at the shelter, the work that we have to do. So just to kind of conclude this, there's 4 ways that we do try to save their lives. Adoption would obviously, that would be a check. They can go ahead and leave and get adopted by somebody. The second way is if their owners come back for them. The third way is if they get transferred to another location. So for example, Fresno Wildlife, Valley Animal Center, or some other shelter that does have space that can take the animals from us. And then the last way that they would get their life saved is if they would get fostered. So taken care of temporarily by somebody before they get placed up for adoption. So in all these capacities, we have some sort of relationship, right? A human with an animal, right? So something's going on there where we're trying to help them and, take them out of the shelter and into a more stable home. We are temporary. None of the shelters are permanent. We're not there to keep the animals forever. They are there. We're just a transition. They're here to come through us to receive medical care, shelter, and food before they move on to their next stage, which is going to be into a permanent home. So those are kind of the relationships that we see at the shelter. And again, unfortunately, that bond tends to be broken because the animal was missing something that it was not receiving in a previous home. And now that's why it came in as a stray, or that's why it came in as a surrender, or we had to confiscate it. So it was missing something. So when I think of shelters, I don't think of these animals as necessarily like animals that were found homeless. We don't live in a third world country where that's necessarily the case. But I do see them as animals coming from a place where they were not properly cared for. And they usually have had owners in the past.
Thank you. Thank you all for speaking about that. So those are kind of some of the basics. That's what all of our experts do. I will reiterate, we love when professionals show animals, but teams cannot bring... Was that me? Was that the feedback? I'm going to step over here. So we are not allowing teams to bring animals, live animals, to events unless they are the ADA, I'm not sure, the service animals that, of course, by law are allowed at events. up. So please don't bring your little animals. And then also, just before we open this up totally to question and answer, kind of want to reiterate the project a little bit, analyzing human and animal interactions, both positive and negative. How can we improve these interactions for the human, the animal, or both? So with that said, I want to open it up. We'll let you guys speak your questions into the microphone, and then our experts will answer accordingly. So who's up first? You don't have any questions? You can ask about what they've already talked about, or if you walked in here with questions and think they might be able to answer, or if I can, we'd love to do that, but this is a Q&A session. Throw it out. There's no bad questions.
For the SPCA, on average, how many animals do you think come in that have ID versus not have ID?
Unfortunately, it's very minimal. If we were to get like those, let's say that today we were to get 100 animals, we would see about 5 IDs. So it's very little the amount of animals that are coming in with a chip, a license tag, or a regular name tag, and it's also very minimal the amount that are coming in spay or neutered. So although we are, there's many organizations promoting spay and neuter and identification, it's not a high number. We're not seeing it in stray animals that are coming in.
Thank you. What else?
What about your volunteer base? I mean, do you guys get a lot of volunteers, just a few volunteers? How does that work in Fresno?
Any specific?
We do have a volunteer, a large volunteer pool. We see about 200 different volunteers that come in a month, and we do have opportunities as low as 8 years old on above. So we have like a critter kids, care club, youth, and adults, and we transition them on up to various capacities to help out the shelter. We do orientation once a month, so every month we're constantly registering people to come in and help us because the workload is so great. So a year we see about 30,000 animals. So it's definitely a lot of animals to care for. So although we have about 80 staff members, it's still not enough because, again, the workload is great. So we definitely encourage everybody to come in and volunteer. And again, our registration is open for everybody, and it happens every month.
And again, there was a project update early last week. Just to make sure to clarify, we encourage interactions with the students and the animals. It is not a requirement that your students interact with the animal they are researching. By all means they can if it's in a safe environment, but it is not required. So don't feel pressured, but you can be encouraged.
This question's for all of you, but if there was like one thing you could pinpoint that would make your job easier helping the animals, or that anyone else could do to help the animals, what would that one thing be?
Get them educated enough so that they don't pick up the fawn, they don't pick up the baby bird. So since you're not asking us questions, I'm going to ask you one. Why are there so many baby birds on the ground at springtime? Aha, back to school you all go. All right, this is something for you to take back. Hopefully you'll always remember this. Almost every species of bird out there has to spend some time on the ground as part of their natural maturation process. And we have them picked up when they don't need anybody to help. It's part of their process of growing up. And so everybody sees a baby bird on the ground, they want to pick it up, take it home? No. Not unless you see a wing drooping or it's limping, leave it alone.
Thank you. I was wondering, asking the audience, are the microphones difficult to understand? This is a giant room and there's not many people. Are you guys having issues understanding us when we're on the microphones at all? Okay, because just for the sake, we record all of our sessions, and so for the people who will be watching these later, if we don't speak into microphones, they might not hear us. So if we can try to use them as much as possible, I'll keep pushing those. But thank you. Now, any other questions? We have, we still have quite a bit. I think, Shahe, we have until 11, right? So we have 30 more minutes of questions.
I was kind of looking more for like tools for you guys. Like what sort of things might make your job easier to do, to accomplish your job? What would help you accomplish your job, like as far as tools go or anything like that?
Almost like, I think what the coaches are maybe looking for in that question is maybe even like a hypothetical. It could be something, I mean, these kids have really, there's no ceiling to their ideas. So they can think of wild ideas. So, I mean, if you guys could dream of something, a physical tool, something that would help, something that community members could do. I mean, it could be out there. But throw maybe a bone, maybe a little bit to the coaches of, you know, how can their kids impact your job and maybe even make your lives easier? That really makes any sense.
So this is in my mind when I heard this. This is kind of crazy, but one of the things, when we do have to raise a young animal from a very little baby, we have to hide our faces. We have to disguise ourselves because we don't want this animal to see us. Because if they start seeing our faces and hearing our voices, then they'll start to become imprinted. So we have to be very careful where we keep these animals because we need it to be almost soundproof so they can't see us, can't hear us. And so one of the first things when I heard this, I was kind of thinking, it was like in the back of my head, I thought it would be funny if somebody could create like almost a robotic version of our birds that we could actually like give the food to and they could feed the babies, or something that would almost like be like what they would see from their real mother, that wouldn't just be us covering our faces. I think would be something fascinating because we do have to be really careful, and they typically don't get to see what even their mother would look like because we're just kind of throwing food to them. We have to be very careful. A robotic hawk.
That's fascinating. Interesting. I didn't know that you had to cover your faces. That's really neat. Interesting. Anyone else have kind of and that is like, you know, perfect, because the students, what they want to do is they want to solve your problems. You know, they want to solve these issues, and even no matter how wild and out there it is, that's what they're trying to do so that they can come to you and share their solutions, because everyone should be sharing the solutions, all the students, so they can come to you and go, we've solved your problem. Here you go. You don't got to think about it anymore. These 9-year-olds got it for you.
So as far as the fish and wildlife, what would you say is the biggest offense that humans do in relation to that environment? Whether it's breaking a law that they might not know about, what would you say would be the biggest offense?
Oh, man. Okay, so that's a good one. Probably the most detrimental things we come across are, it's either interactions between humans and animals or interactions between humans and their habitat. So the big scary ones, you know, are the guys that drive the tractors through the middle of the stream, that kind of thing. But a lot of it is not it's not, you know, the guy with the big black mustache out there doing something bad. It's those little things that add up. The lady up in Coarse Gold who decides to feed deer every day, and she fills them so full of carrots they die from acidosis. You know, those kind of things. So I'm sitting here trying to think of individual problems, and from a state level, most of our problems are kind of the sad, annoying ones. They're the we don't have enough resources to do this. We don't have enough money to outreach people. So I wish I could build an outreach robot. So as far as gizmos and gadgets goes, you know, I mean, we do a lot of scientific studies. So you know, finding ways to camera trap deer or get be able to get close to elk, things like that. There's cool robotic stuff that way, but I think as far as big transgressions go, really it comes down to some core simple stuff like education. It really does. Education, interaction between us and the public. Because it seems like all these problems, whether they be the dogs and cats, the abandoned wildlife, it's all, if people would just use their brains a little bit and think about these things, it wouldn't be an issue. So.
I kind of have two things. So one, there was another project clarification that the definition of, or maybe not the definition of, but when first means that they want the children to interact with animals, or people should be interacting with humans. They do not mean necessarily when humans physically touch animals. They interact by, feeding them, or, it's a little bit looser. It doesn't have to be a physical touch. It can be feeding. And also, I had a question. It was going to be really good. I don't know. My question is gone. Go for it.
Just really quick to help you guys out. When these teams are looking for a project idea, it doesn't have to involve a robot or a gizmo or anything electronic. It can actually be an educational campaign that these kids do or something. So, yeah, when you're brainstorming saying what would help in our jobs, it can actually be anything under the sun, not even involving robots. Robots are awesome. So, yeah.
Well, I can give you one that I've wanted to do for a million years. I would love to see some type of eye-catching, either billboard or signage, even though I'm not into putting things along the beautiful highway, but it needs to be done. It needs to say, leave Bambi alone. At the entrance of every park, at the entrance of anywhere where the public goes, I'd love to see signage that says, I don't need you. I really don't need your help. Leave me alone. Fawns are typically, they can be left alone for 8 hours or more. And everybody thinks that they've got to get picked up. Please don't touch me. I would love to see something like that. That would make our job so much easier. We had 17 deer fawns turned into us, and it costs us about $200 or more per deer just for their formula alone. That doesn't count the grain and everything else. That was in the beginning. Now that we know that we can reunite, the mother will come back to find her baby. I think the last one that we heard of was up to 11 days. But we know they can typically come back. They'll keep looking for their baby. And if we can get that baby put right back where it was found, we have a really good chance of reuniting. How much better is that for mom to raise her own than for us to be involved? So things like this, a campaign would be wonderful. And then in springtime for baby birds, every school should be alerted to teach their kids, if it's on the ground, leave it alone. I can't tell you how many school secretaries call me and say, some kids found some baby birds, blah, 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 blah. If they are touched, can you put them back in the nest? Yes. That's an old wives' tale. The only birds that really use their sense of smell are vultures, and like the vultures, the condors, the buzzards, and nobody else uses a sense of smell. So even if they see you touch the baby bird, it lasts in their brain about a split second. You put it back in the nest, they don't care. They want it back. They'll raise it. What if the nest falls out? How do you handle that? Create an artificial nest with a shoebox or some type of box with high sides. Put tissue paper in there. But there are a lot of things that can go out to the schools that these kids could develop that would be eye-catching and fun. I'm old, I'm jaded, I have no idea, and I'm certainly not part of the electronic, world. Find something that hits and creates that snap in their brain to make them want to go out and, oh yeah, hey guys, let's fix that nest, let's put it back up there, and we're done. It's perfect.
Something that would be helpful is a chip for a pet that is a GPS tracking device. Currently, the microchips are not like that. The microchips are basically, they get inserted like an injection between the shoulder blades under the skin of the pet. It's the size of a grain of rice. But if your pet gets lost, they have to be taken to a shelter to be scanned, and then that's how you would find out if your pet's there, because we would call you. We scan every animal. So a chip that is a GPS tracking device, that would be awesome. I know that they already sell them in collar form, so you could get a collar that you could find on your app on your phone and figure out that your dog is on McKinley and First or something like that. But but the current chips are not like that. So maybe if they did make them like that, it might be, we could reunite more families. And then other things that have come to mind, but these are like really simple homemade things. That's why I didn't really bring them up, but I'll bring them up anyway. Some sort of dog deterrent. So a lot of children have to walk home from school and then you encounter dogs. And a lot of these kids get bit by dogs that are wandering the streets. So what can they carry so they don't get bit? How can they, you know, deter this dog, right, from their area or something? So something that you could make at home, but I don't know if you guys could come up with something different, is just for the child to carry a water bottle, put vinegar in it, and you squirt that in their face. That way, you know, the dog is kind of like, you know, like out of their senses, and then the child's able to, you know, get away from the situation. So that also would be helpful because we get a lot of calls of people getting bit. And then another one regarding education that would probably be helpful for us is like some sort of like like for example, the Fresno Fair's coming up and we're there every day and we have a big trailer and we talk to a lot of people and give out a lot of information. Sometimes I'll walk around and I'll get far away from our booth. So maybe some sort of like drape or apron or something where I can put all my pamphlets and then I don't have to keep going back to the booth. And that helps us with the educational part. We can go and, you know, carry all our stuff, right, all the things that we need in our some sort of pouch, and then we can walk away from our booth and educate. We'll be walking, you know, education little booths, you could say. So I don't know, I was just thinking about those things. Again, these are very simple things that could be made at home already, but if you can twist that or if you can just use that concept and make it happen, that would be interesting.
Thank you. That was really good. I think that's helpful.
To the gentleman from Fish and Game, you talk a little bit about if there are invasive species that have been introduced by man in the region and how they might impact some of the wildlife locally?
Does this work? I hate these things. That's a big question. Because if you basically walk outside, you'll see that everything's invasive. I mean, you can start from the plants up, because all the weeds you see driving around, those weren't here, you know, 10,000 years ago. So, starting from the beginning, we as we fed cattle, things like that, we brought in seed sources from Europe. Those have spread throughout. A lot of aquatic invasive species we've seen, not so much the terrestrial side. I mean, there are a couple examples out there, but more common ones here in Fresno are things like, anybody ever had a pet turtle? Red-eared sliders were real common in pet shops years ago. I don't even know if they still are. You know, somebody gets a little baby turtle the size of a $50, and then a couple years later, it's the size of a chihuahua. And next thing you know, that they take that to the nearest ponding basin and drop it off, or lake, wherever they decide it looks serene. So we have a lot of issues like that, aquatics, frogs, things like that. Are you trying to think of some kind of solution, or what's on your mind? That's a hard question. I think it is. I mean, it's something us as an agency have been trying to tackle for 90 years or so. And I don't know if there's any simple solutions out there. Animals are very hardy. You know, your typical animal has been evolving for about 20,000 years. So they've worked out most of the hitches as far as surviving. So it's difficult for us to turn around and just remove them out the gate. But if I can think of anything, I'll definitely let you guys know, because that's a great question.
I'll definitely throw out, make sure the interactions are human to animal. That's important. What might be interesting for the coaches to hear about is, I mean, what are the issues maybe, or if there are any, I'm not sure, with when maybe you guys as the service interact with the invasive species? Is that different than interacting with, say, a native species? Do you guys need any help interacting with invasive species? I mean, is it more dangerous than usual? Is it not? I mean, like analyzing your interactions with the invasive species maybe, and maybe shine on light on like how you as the humans are interacting with them. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's not an issue and you're just used to them. I'm clutching at straws.
So, well, it is an issue, for example, with the red-eared sliders. That is the type of breed that the Ninja Turtles are. So when that movie came out, everybody wanted to have a Ninja Turtle, and this happens every time there's an animal movie, everybody wants that animal. So right before the 90s, there was a law that was passed that said that, you know, you could only, if you were gonna get a turtle, it had to be a certain size because of salmonella and, you know, kids getting infected and things like that, and, you know, touching the turtle, putting their hands in their mouth, or even putting the turtle in their mouth because they were so little. So they had to be a certain diameter before you could get these turtles, or still actually. And then they became popular. So now we have the red-eared sliders. They come in often to the shelter. That tends to be one of the most common turtles that we get. And then we put them up for adoption. What happens is that these animals, they're great, they're wonderful pets, but at the same time, there's so much work, and people get tired of cleaning the tank. So I always tell people, if you're gonna get a turtle, expect that you're gonna care for this animal 30, 50 years, you know, they live a long time. So it's really good to know just how long animals live before you decide to take them on as pets. Because at the end, they're gonna show up at the shelter again. They'll adopt it, and then they're like, oh my God, it's so much work. And then they give it on to somebody, they go abandon it at Woodward Park. We see that happen. We've gotten calls about people physically seeing other people leaving animals at Woodward Park. In the pond, there's a colony of cats that I've seen. Even dogs, and so it happens, and so, but yeah, so I don't know how to, I think we keep coming back to the solution is education. It's just understanding that, you know, if you're gonna take on an animal, it's a responsibility, you know, whether you're affecting that animal's habitat, or you're affecting that animal, or you're affecting some sort of dynamic in our social atmosphere.
May I chime in real quick? I had an idea. Ooh. I project really loud normally, so I yell into this thing. One of the big things that we do with Fish and Game is what we call depredation. It's the classic concept of depredation is the mountain lion jumps in your backyard, eats your goats. So we as an agency have to interact with those people and deal with the situation, whether it be if it's something extreme, possibly take the animal out of that situation, or find ways to deter animals from coming onto people's property. And a lot of the methodology we have to deter animals, whether it be the starling out of your backyard, the coyotes from coming into some place, they're kind of prehistoric. You know, we tell people to hang CDs up to scare birds off, reflective tape, sensor lights, things like that. What would be really interesting would be to design some kind of device, and I'm sorry I'm coming back to devices, that would be able to deter animals from a certain area, whether it be an avian species like geese, you know, the backyard geese that come in from the local wet spot, or coyotes that would eat your cats, things like that. That would actually be really interesting because, you know, I mean, what else? Sprinklers. We tell people to have sensor sprinklers. But most of the stuff that we do is still pretty archaic stuff that they've been doing for the past 50, 60 years. So that just came to mind all of a sudden. Yeah.
Anyone else got any variety? And I'll run up to the back too. I don't mind hopping the benches. So feel free, anyone.
So when it comes to deterring animals, right, if the experts are using, like you said, archaic devices, who would you suggest would be a good resource for, I mean, each kind of animal would have a different type of deterrent, I'm sure. We've been dealing with birds ourselves for quite a while, and right now I have this really loud bird noise maker that all my neighbors hate, but that's the only way that I can keep the birds away from my house. And I kept looking for information on the internet, you know, as to how to get rid of birds, but there's really not that much other than, I sell this product, try this, you know, or I sell that other product. I mean, who would be, is there agencies that specifically work on that type of investigation or that kind of science outside of, you know, what you might find on the internet?
Okay, I'm sure there's not any agencies that deal with that. It's more kind of based on the individual bird's behavior or critter's behavior. So it would require quite a bit of research to figure out what that particular animal wouldn't like or maybe susceptible to. Like birds, it sounds like you're used to the shell crackers, right? The explosions, the sounds to scare birds off. Those aren't quite as fun, are they? But yeah, but there's got to be some kind. I think some research would have to be done. I mean, there's lots of scientific research out there from universities and places like that that look into individual behavior. Go ahead.
In terms of robotics, drone? How about design a drone that looks like a falcon? Because all birds, when they hatch out of the egg, know what the shape of a falcon wing is. It's hardwired. And every bird in the world basically is terrified of a falcon. So you can either make it look like a great horned owl, which is another big top of the food chain guy, or a large falcon, and have it just circle your area, and the birds leave. And the only reason I know that it works is because they use actual living falcons to keep birds from going through the wine district, the wine area up in Napa and Sonoma. And when I was up there, I encouraged them to hire a falconer. The falconer charges a lot, but it's a lot cheaper than having them go in and net their vineyard. So what they do is they bring in birds of prey, they fly them for a certain amount of time, bring them in, put another one up in the air, fly it for a certain amount of time, and what they're doing is they're moving the birds that are migrating through, that are eating the berries, they're moving them out of the area. These guys are getting in the neighborhood of about $1,800 to $2,400 a day to do that. So somebody want to make some money, create some of those mechanical devices that are shaped like a falcon or a great horned owl, preferably a large falcon, and I think you would have something going for a big money maker for you. Then you can retire early.
Some of the golf courses use terrestrial predators too, right? The
right.
coyote, the big stuffed coyote that never moves.
Yeah. But then they get used to it, so you've got to have something that keeps moving. How many of you have seen great horned owls on buildings? And they work for about 3 days, and then the pigeons are pooping on the top of them. Yeah, so they're really not that effective. Animals are much smarter than people give them credit for being.
Just to add to that question, actually, as far as finding research, because it's overwhelming to just Google things. One of the best resources that we've used is Fresno State and other universities. There are professors and grad students researching this stuff. So if you contact the university or find, find the biology department, call the office and say, I have, kids on a robotics team and we're doing a research project. We want to learn about frogs. Who could we talk to that can tell us about frogs? And whatever it is, they can get you in touch with the right people who are either working in the industry or researching it, and you can ask them very specific questions, and they would be able to be the ones to tell you anything you want to know. So don't be afraid to ask the colleges in the area.
State does have some experts too. We have a ton of biologists that specialize in different animals as well. So between the university and the government, you should be able to figure something out.
I was just wondering, for the wildlife and for the birds of prey, in your fields, what animals here in the valley are most at risk or endangered, need the most help? If you could identify one or two.
Okay, so we have a big list of animals out there that are on the endangered and threatened list. A couple, just for reference, are the antelope ground squirrel, Tipton kangaroo rat, the San Joaquin kit fox down south, things like that. So the trick is once you start increasing the amount of regulation for an animal, it becomes infinitely more hard to work with that animal. So let's say you wanted to try to help kit fox. It would be a pretty big leap for a local project requiring permitting and all kinds of government bureaucracy. So it's a good idea, and those animals do need help. It's a big bite to take.
How many of you have seen the movie Hoot? Anybody? Whoa. I guess it wasn't a big seller. It was about as human beings interfering with habitat for the burrowing owl. And Taylor's our resident burrowing owl expert. She does a great job with them. But when we take a burrowing owl into a classroom setting, the kids really get it. You pave over their domain, where are they going to go? And then when the empathy starts setting in, then things start moving along. And kids start having input, and they have a buy-in. So anytime that you can do that, I think that's so great. If they can see the living thing right in front of them, which is what we do, that makes it so much more personal.
We have about time for maybe one more question. Anyone has one?
This one's for I guess, anybody that has animals at their facility. So we take care of their needs when it comes to food and water and shelter. Is there other needs that are, even as important or, more difficult to supply for? I'm looking at some of the pictures of the animals on the cages, and they look really depressed. I mean, is there something other than food and water that it would be good if we could have help providing?
That's actually a really great question, and that's something that I can't believe I didn't even think of it earlier. Yes, we have a lot of our educational animals that aren't releasable, and what we have to do is, because in the wild they typically always be doing something, and now they're with us and they don't have an active life, we have to create safe enrichments and projects for them to do to keep them busy. And what that does is it keeps their minds healthy, so when they're with us, they can live the most fulfilling life. So they're not able to be in the wild and do what they're supposed to do, but with us, they can still be healthy and live very fulfilling lives. So creating enrichments, projects, toys that they can play with. For example, like putting their food in some kind of like box or something that they can kind of figure out how to get it. Because we can't feed them live animals because it's not safe, because most of them have candy caps. But creating situations where it kind of creates the same kind of mental stimulation that would keep their minds going and keep them from like basically just going insane.
Interesting. That was a real neat question. Thank you for that. And thank you all so much. It is 11 o'clock, but both audience and our panel members, thank you so much for coming out. I know the coaches always enjoy this seminar, so thank you all.